Could you put the amendment up and I'll use that as my speaking time?
It's a motion. We're going to treat it as a motion. It's not, yours isn't an amendment.
Madam Chair.
Sure, we'll give you to speak then.
This is one of the first issues that's united New Zealand. We've heard from ministers of the Crown, we've heard from opposition members of Parliament, we've heard from rock stars and models. And more important,
That was
who don't live in New Zealand.
Let's not work out who they are, and some of them are in the room, I can see them. Councillor Casey.
from the local board. More importantly, we've heard from the local community in droves, turning out at 6 a.m. in the morning, staying through the night, and Michael Tavares up his tree, coming down today. But what they want to hear from their elected members is that we support them. And we do. We supported them at the Environment Committee, we supported them at the Parks Committee, and everybody in this room, to the last man and woman, has a view about the tree. And I would suggest that that would be 99.9%, with the exception probably of one or two, in support of this kauri staying where it is. That's all this is about. So it doesn't interfere with judicial process. It just tells the community who are gathered here today and probably watching on the telly that we care about this tree too. So I'm moving that we support the Waitakere Ranges Local Board opposing the felling of the kauri tree at 40 Pataroa Road, Titirangi.
Okay, so
I look forward to your support.
Yep, so that's foreshadowed. Thank you, Councillor Casey. I'm sure there will be a seconder come forward. But speaking to the motion on the table, I've got Councillor Wood.
So which one are we speaking to now?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I have added that with your, you've allowed us to do it, to add B, which is that there is a degree of independence and that the Chief Planning Officer will lead the review. I think that's very appropriate. I've actually just received, I've now received the notification recommendation for this application. Hadn't seen it previously. I have got real concerns about the material that is in this document from the local board. It seems that it's a pretty scant kind of insertion into the document, where I think on a matter, or any matter that the local board submits on, it should be, I think, done in a fairly clear way. It just looks like they've taken what's come out of the emails and it's just been put into the document, and it's not in the conclusion in the end. It doesn't seem that there's no mention of that for the hearing commissioner, or the fact that other people have also objected. They're the next door neighbours at 38, and I think there's some other people that have also put in submissions. So I mean, I don't think the other councils have probably got this material, but I think this is the nub of what we're talking about here. We're talking about doing things better in the future, and I think it's very important that we do look at the involvement of the 21 local boards across Auckland, because they're all requested that they would be given this input, and I think it's very timely that we are going to do this review. I hope it's done in a fairly quick time, because and that we can get some directives put out to the local boards and the planners as to what the procedure is going to be in the future. But I think we've got to take a lot more cognizance of what the local boards say. So I'll ask councillors to support this. I'm not going to support the other amendment. I don't think, as Mr Hassel said, we can take this much further, and I think it's a matter that could be taken up by another party. Thank you.
So Councillor Wood speaking for. Marlene.
The councillors, and I want to acknowledge the staff here, firstly. I think one of the key points in this process is again where we have struggled in this first 4 years, is the dividing line between governance and operations and management. And we have actually delegated this role to the staff. We set the rules, worked in beside government, they set the rules. We operate under that framework, we do our very best to make the rules represent the best of the community, the general view, the philosophy, our vision, and then we leave it to the staff. And we leave it to them on the basis that the Chief Executive Officer has appointed people with the very best of qualifications, of course within a very difficult funding capping envelope, and then they are tasked to do the job, which is a completely invidious task. And when issues become a matter of public import, of course, they're the first ones in the firing line as to why they made the decisions they did. They make them under the framework that we provide for them. They, of course, have discretions, and so often in discretion, the discretions we have in our political leadership, you'll sometimes look back and think, you know, crikey, if I'd known that, I might have made a different decision. Of course, that is going to be the outcome on occasions, and I'm not saying that's this one of these occasions. I just want to acknowledge the staff for the fact that they have an extraordinarily difficult job to do in this area, and they do it very, very well. And I think it is critical for us to stand behind them in a time when they must feel pretty lonely. Secondly, the issue of the review, of course, is critical. We've been in place now for 4 years. And having put the structure in place against the backdrop of statutory direction, is now our job to just sort of reflect on what needs a bit of reviewing and changing, and to really catch the temperature of the community and make sure that our decision making does reflect their concerns. And then we do it against the backdrop of competing philosophies around the city. We need to build houses flat out. Our houses are too expensive. And we have a community at the same time who want to get into more affordable housing, at the same time having a very strong view around the environmental impact that the building of those houses impacts and affects. And that's reflected also in the statutory discussion that happens at a parliamentary level. You know, Parliament is, and the government is very determined that we continue apace, and have reflected the change in the legislation to make sure that that pace occurs at a political level and at a statutory level and at a regulatory level. And there's been some arcane discussion relating to what sort of impacts the 2009, 2013, 2012 changes have. They have had a change. They've clearly had an impact. Whether or not you reflect this area as being part of the Waitakere Ranges or not, they've had an impact across the city. And the officers have tried to reflect that. And so, at the end of the day, I want to acknowledge them and commend them and encourage them to carry on a really difficult task, because I do not want this stuff to become decision by committee. Just a final comment in terms of the outcome from the viewpoint of the owner. He's clearly written a letter that we've all reflected on today. And clearly a difficult decision for him to make, but it has led to the trees, in particular the 2 trees at this point in time, being left in situ. And I think that hopefully, one, that takes a lot of the steam out of the discussion, because this discussion needs to be one, as we review, where our mind is absolutely over our heart. It is very much about best process and ensuring the integrity of the process so that people can believe it and trust it when we go through it. Those important decisions around notification, non-notification sit right in the middle of that. So, Madam Chair, I'm very, very supportive of the overwhelming process that, or the reviewing process that you've got in place with the recommendation. Even though there might be a sentiment for Councillor Cathy's proposal, it basically flies in the face, totally in the face, of what it is that we are wanting to do here. One, back the officers, because they've done their statutory role with the very best of their capability, no more or less. And then secondly, carry out a review. I will not support in any way, fashion or form any process within this council chamber that looks like a lack of solidity or solidarity or reliability or consistency in our decision making. And so there may be a sentimental reflex for what has been suggested from Councillor Casey. but we have to totally back the recommendation to ensure the integrity of the process that everyone else wants us to have in place and to be able to back themselves. One day you'll be on this side of the fence, the next day you'll be on that. One day you'll be against the developers next door, the next you'll want to be developing.
Exactly.
And so we've got to sit in the middle of that, councillors, and balance those critical things and find the right balance. And you don't do it by turning your back on the process itself and or potentially opening it up for some type of process that might sunder the integrity of what we have got to this point.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Cashmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we look at cutting straight to the chase, we've been informed this morning from our staff and via the question process about what has happened here. There's not one person around this table who doesn't love our native bush. That's been signalled politically for a long, long time. And it's very important that we do appreciate and put the significance of that to the fore. There's a balance here between the community's expectations, the timeframes as set by the statutes, and the development of our nation. If you're going to say stop, no, nothing, no one would have got off the boat. No one would have got off the boat. So what's been proposed here is pragmatic. The property owner has made a generous offer. Let's proceed down that path with staff and the interested parties, come to a resolution that works, and then let's review our own processes, take our education from this and other pieces of information that we have, and come up with a new set of proposals that can help inform the stage 2 of the RMA. Because that is going to be a critical piece of work. It's going to set the blueprint for how we work going forward. So I strongly urge you, councillors, to support the recommendations as put before us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cashmore. Councillor Darby.
Thanks, Chair. And good questions today and good debate and a good item before us because it's testing us. And we should not be shying away from this sort of test. And it's long overdue in my opinion. So we've heard the roar from the Waitakaris and that's reached Town Hall and it's reached Wellington and it's reached Hollywood it seems, but it should not take one man clambering up a beautiful tree to have it heard here, supported by many thousands to that one man, but to awaken ministers and our mayor to actually participate, or ourselves as councillors. It should not take that. It's not a new issue. It's seriously been around for a couple of years since the legislative changes, and that's what this review that's being posed in this motion focuses on. But post these legislative changes, we've seen an explosion in this city of a whole new industry, and it's the arboricultural industry. And it's a great place to get a job because you will have 80 hours of work a week felling trees all over Auckland. You buy yourself an orange vest, an orange still saw and some ropes and you're in business, and you letterbox neighbourhoods and you remind people in those letterboxes that the tree protection rules have changed and you can have a damn good business. And many people right across Auckland are doing that right now. So the green backyard is very important, but I would say, which is getting thinned at a rapid rate of knots and daily. But I remind you also that there's a blue backyard. And I have been thinking, and I've canvassed it with some of my colleagues here today and with you, Madam Chair, and staff, to add in under the address of Paturoa Road, the address of Bledisloe Wharf extensions. I've chosen not to because I think it does need to be focused on the tree protection rules. But let's not forget the blue backyard and the green backyard, which are both under pressure. And there are parallels here. There are definitely parallels. But I hope it doesn't take one man climbing a tree to inspire maybe 1 or 8 to climb a straddle crane or a container crane down at Bledisloe or Ferguson. I hope not. But we need to wake up to that as well, and I would hope some of our political leaders come forward as they have seen to come forward on this issue, on the Bledisloe issue, and others that will pop up. One thing this does highlight to me is the legislative changes, and while I see that the government wants to And I'd probably like to expand this inquiry that the staff will undertake here, Madam Chair. And I see that the government really is quite keen for us to report back, as our other councils, to report back on consenting numbers and timeframes, that we're turning these consent applications around in double quick time, and we're enabling development, and we're doing everything smart there. One thing that gives me great concern is that there's very little attention to the purpose of the Act under Section 5. And to my knowledge, there is no auditing within this council, and probably around New Zealand there is no auditing post code compliance certificate issuance. So we don't really know what is happening in terms of compliance with consent conditions. Now, we've heard today that there are strict conditions on this particular consent. 5 years hence, 8 years hence, 10 years hence, who knows what level of compliance there might be in this one, or the many thousands of others related to tree consents where significant trees have been felled in the last 2 years. So, Madam Chair, I think there's space for us in our discussions leading into our finalising our submission to the government on the RMA, that we actually start to discuss the need for post-consent auditing. And I don't mean flying a plane over and having a guess as to how much tree cover there is, or using LiDAR, which I've heard about ad nauseum over the years. We just plainly do not post-consent audit. It doesn't happen, and I think that is a significant oversight in the legislation. Here is an opportunity for us to feed back to government and actually say, fill that gap in the legislation. Otherwise, we will be back here at another meeting discussing another 200 or 500-year-old kauri that is subject to being felled. So I think that's a really important issue, and one that we can flush out in our submission points, in addition to the review that the staff are undertaking here today. And I hope that they can pick that up, and there's general agreement that we need to look at post-code compliance certificate auditing. Thank you, Madam Chair.